Hey guys, today we're going to create this coffee cup from the Onshape tutorial. We talked about this in class the other day, so I just want to make a quick reference video to help guide you through this process. In today's model, we're going to use two tools that we've been working with in class. We're going to use the Revolute tool as well as the Sweep tool. So let's go ahead and get started. So please make sure that you access this link through our Schoology course. It should be posted in the Monday folder or the Wednesday folder, depending on which day you have this class. So I will be starting with this tutorial, and I will be walking through each of the steps as listed on the Onshape tutorial. So this is the opening page that it'll take you to. If you look on the left side here, you'll see that there are several other steps in this that we can look at. The one that we are starting with is the last one, which is the coffee cup. So we're going to click on next page, and we're going to walk through here. So the first step is to create a new document and make sure that the workspace length unit is set to millimeters. We're actually not going to do that, because we've already created a document, and it's got the model that we made in class the other day, the paperclip. So for this, we will be working in the same document overall. Make sure that it's named with your class period, your last name, your first name, and then paperclip and cup. Once we're in that document, on the bottom left, we're going to click the plus sign, and we're going to create a new part studio. Make sure that you rename your part studios to have specific names. This part studio, we're going to right click and we're going to select rename, and we're going to name it coffee cup. So now this is the environment that we're working in, and this is the model that we will create. So now I'm going to go back to my tutorial and look at the instructions there. It says we're going to begin our sketch on the front plane. So I'm going to go back to Onshape. I'm going to click on Create a Sketch, and I'm going to click on Front from my feature menu. I'm going to use my view cube here to click on Front so that I'm working on the plane that I can see in front of me. Let's go to the next step. So this is the part that we're going to draw next. You can see that we've got a couple things going on here. We've got our origin down here on the bottom. We've got a vertical line and a horizontal line. And then at the top of the vertical line, we've got another horizontal line. There's also an angled line right here and an arc that connects the two lines at the top here. So let's go ahead and make this basic shape. We also need to add this construction line, and we'll add that in a moment. So I'm going to use the line tool to draw my first couple of lines. The first one's going to be the vertical line. Make sure that it starts on the origin. So I'm just going to draw a line straight up. It doesn't really matter how long it is because we're going to give the dimension later. I'm going to also go ahead and draw that horizontal line that we saw in the diagram here as well. Now I'm going to go back into the line tool, and I'm going to add the bottom line. Make sure that it's horizontal, as well as that angled line. It doesn't matter what angle or length we set it to right now because we will dimension that later. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of the line tool, and you can see that we've got something similar to what they've got here. We need to add that arc line here next. So we're going to be using the 3-point arc to connect these. I'm going to click this line, and then the top line. And we actually do have to make sure of one thing here. So as I move this back and forth, you can see that I get a snap right here. And we get that little line with a circle. We actually want it to do that because we want to make sure that this line, the angled line on the bottom here, and this arc line here are tangent to each other. And we haven't really talked about what that means yet, so we'll talk more about that later. But this is something that it specifically states that needs to be true in the instructions. It says that it needs to add a tangent sketch constraint between the line and the arc as indicated. So if we click on Show Constraints here, we can see that that tangent constraint is applied. And again, we'll talk more about what that means later. Okay, let's go to the next. Actually, we need to add our construction line. There's a construction line on the vertical axis here that goes from the origin to just above our coffee mug. So I'm going to click on line. And remember in class we said that you can just press the Q key to turn a line into a construction line. You can see that when I do that, the construction option here on the menu is highlighted. So I'm going to click on my origin and just draw a construction line vertically up from there. So now we've got something that's not exactly the same, but pretty darn similar to our tutorial sketch. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This has all of our instructions. So I'm going to go ahead and add in some of the basic stuff here. I'll start with the 100 millimeter vertical line. So I'm going to open dimension mode by pressing the D key on my keyboard. You can see that the dimension tool is highlighted here. Make sure you're still in sketch mode, by the way. So I will click on my origin and click on the top line, or the top point of the line. And then I'm going to type in 100 millimeters and hit enter. And you should see that your model resizes a little bit when we do that. You can also see that it says 3.937 here. That's in inches. Okay, the next measurement is from the bottom line to where it meets the arc, and we're going to make that 40 millimeters. So I'm going to click this dot, and then click this dot, and we're going to dimension that to be 40 mm. And I'll hit enter. So hopefully you can see that it's getting similar to the shape that it's supposed to look like. Next, let's add the radius of this arc. Looks like it's set to 90 millimeters here. So I'm still in dimension mode. I'm going to click on my arc, and I'm going to place this right here and type in 90 mm. But we still have two dimensions that we need to add. And these ones are a little different than the ones that we've looked at before, because you can see that these dimensions actually go over to the other side, and that's because these are actually diameters. Our coffee cup is actually going to be a circular shape when it's done, so we need to define these distances accordingly. So I'll show you how to do that. So in the instructions it actually says you can add the diameter dimension by clicking from the construction line to the vertex indicated with the dimension tool, and move your cursor along across the construction line. So what that means is that we will be defining these distances using our construction line and the points in the end. So I will click the point, and then I'll click the construction line. And if I try to place it over here, you can see that it says 2.867, and it's just defining it between those points. But if I drag it over this way, you can see how now I have that diameter symbol, and now it measures it all the way across. So we'll drop that here, and I'm going to peek back over here to double check that number. So that's supposed to be 125 millimeters. So I'll type in 125 mm and hit enter. Then we're going to do the same thing at the bottom. That's going to be 75 millimeters. So I'll click on this point and click on my construction line, and I'll drop this right here, 75 mm. So if you're following along with me here, you should have a fully constrained sketch on the front view that has all black lines and no blue. We do have one blue dot up here, and that's just for our construction line, and that doesn't really matter, so it's totally fine. Just a reminder that as you are working on this, that you can pause the video and rewind if you need more time or if you didn't catch everything. Okay, let's move to the next step. The next step is to use the offset sketch tool, and what that's going to do is create the inside of the coffee mug, which we will hollow out later. So we're going to use the offset sketch tool to offset the lines and arc 6 millimeters to the inside as shown. So we're going to offset these three features: the bottom line, the angled line, and the arc. The offset tool in your menu is right here. It should look like it's kind of like a B with two lines. So then I'm just going to click on this line, and this line. And you'll notice that when I first click the tool that it's placing it outward instead of inward. So we're just going to drag this the other way. It does not matter how far we drag it because we will define that distance that it offsets. So we can go ahead and place that. The offset is 6 millimeters. So I'm going to double click on the number here, and that's going to allow me to define that offset. So I'll type in 6 mm. Okay, we're almost done. Make sure you press escape to get out of the offset tool. I'm going to drag this number out of the way for now. You may have noticed that we have two dots that are not defined. And I know that they're not defined because I can actually drag these around and nothing changes. If we look at this tutorial here, it says that the vertex of this arc needs to be coincident to the horizontal line, which is math speak for it needs to be touching the top line. And this bottom line needs to be touching the vertical line as well. So there's two ways we can do that. We can apply a constraint. You can also just click and drag the point until it touches the line and it should snap to it. So that's what I'm going to do. And that is the shape that we need. So let's go to the next step. The next step is to make sure that the sketch is fully defined. It is. So we're going to go ahead and keep moving on to step 6. Step 6, we're going to create a solid revolve using the entire sketch profile, using the construction line as the revolve axis. So we're going to select the entire feature, both parts, and the revolve axis will be that construction line. Make sure that it's set to solid and new as well as full. So let's do that. So I'm going to finish my sketch. I'm going to pop up to isometric view here so that I'm looking at it from a different perspective. Then I'm going to use my revolve tool. I'm going to click on both parts of my sketch. Remember that you have to click the red box. So I'll click on revolve axis and then click on my construction line. Set to full, solid, and new. And I'll go ahead and finish the sketch. It's starting to look like a coffee cup, but there's nowhere to put the coffee, so we need to fix that. So the next step is it wants us to rename stuff, but I'm not going to do that right now. We're going to create a new sketch on the front plane. So I'll go to Sketch, click Front, and then in my View Cube I'll click on Front so that we're looking at it from the front view. Okay, next step. We're going to create this drawing. Notice that it is not on the origin, it's just over here off to the side of the profile of the coffee cup. So it's going to be a line and an arc with a construction line going all the way across the arc here. And there's some constraints that we'll add in a second. So first let's add that line. So it looks like it's just a little bit above the bottom here and just a little bit in from the side. So we'll place this here. Doesn't really matter how long it is. We'll define that in a second. Then I'll add that 3-point arc. Make sure that it's set to tangent. It does actually say that in the instructions that the line is tangent to the arc. So I'm just going to drag my arc until I get that snap. And now we'll add that construction line. So I'll use my line tool, press the Q key to turn it into a construction line, and then draw that all the way across the midpoint of the arc. Now notice that this is not actually touching the construction line, so I think we need to fix that because it says that we need to make sure that the construction line is coincident to the center point of the arc. So in my menu here, I'm going to click on Coincident, click on the center point of my arc, and then click on my construction line. You can see it's just corrected just a little bit there. Let's see what's next. Step 10 says, show the main sketch and hide the coffee cup part. Make the endpoints indicated coincident to the main sketch entities and add the dimensions shown. Okay, this part's a little bit technical, so pay close attention here. Alright, so in my feature menu, I have 3 things other than my origin top, front, right. I have sketch 1, revolve 1, and sketch 2. The coffee cup feature is what they were asking for us to hide. So we're going to hide that in just a second. But first I got to complete the sketch. JK, it's not going to let me do that. Let me open sketch 2 back up. Okay. So I can't hide the revolve, but I can see the sketch. You guys can see that dotted line right there, that's my sketch 1. And my sketch 2 is the one that I'm working on right now. So we need to go through and we need to make sure that our sketch that we just added has these dimensions as well as these connections. So we need to make sure that the top of the arc is touching the inner wall of the coffee cup, and we need to make sure that the bottom line is touching the inner wall as well. So I'm going to use the coincident tool. I'm going to click on this point, then I'm going to click on this dotted line. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom line as well. You can see it resized a little bit, and now it's touching the other sketch. Alright, the other thing we need to do is add these 3 dimensions. We need to dimension the radius of the semicircle, as well as how high off of the bottom line these 2 lines are. So 25 millimeters, use the dimension tool. This needs to be 25 millimeters from the bottom line. 25 mm. The top line is 85 millimeters from the bottom line. So this point to this line needs to be 85 mm. And then this has a radius of 20 millimeters. Don't forget to type mm or it won't work. Okay, so now that's fully constrained. Let's go to the next step. So the next step is to just complete the sketch. So we'll click the checkbox. You can see now that we've got both of these things fully defined. Okay. The next step is to create a plane. This is also something that we haven't done before. It's actually very easy. So we're going to create a plane using the curve point option. We're going to select the line and the endpoint from the path sketch as shown. And it says select this endpoint and select this line. So we're going to go into Onshape here, and we are going to look for the plane option in our menu. If you can't find it, you can always search for it here, but this is the plane button. It's going to create our pop-up like it always does. And we're actually going to go into this drop-down, and we're going to select the option that it asked us to, which is curve point. So we've selected curve point. Now we're going to select this endpoint and the path. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to select this endpoint on the handle, the bottom of the handle here. And then I'm going to click on this line. And you can see that it's added that plane. Let me hide my top, front, and right. You can see where that plane is now. That is just a work surface that we're going to use to draw a shape. The game plan here is that we are actually going to use the sweep tool to create the profile of the handle. And in order to do that, we need to actually create a sketch with the shape that that sweep will create. In this case, it'll be a circle. Okay, let's go back to the tutorial. It looks like we're going to create a sketch on that reference plane. We're going to sketch an ellipse, not a circle, I misspoke. And it's going to have these dimensions, 14 millimeters by 10 millimeters. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to click on Create a Sketch. If you want, you can click on this. I find it's easier to just click on my plane in my feature menu. And then I'm going to press the N key to snap to that plane. It actually did it backwards. There we go. And it's a little bit hard to see what we're working with here. But we're drawing on this point down here, on that plane. So I'm going to draw my ellipse. I'm going to use the ellipse tool, which you should be able to find from the drop down under your circle options. And I'm just going to draw it over here for now. let me make sure that we look at the instructions here. So it says create a new sketch on the reference plane created on the last step, sketch an ellipse, add the shown dimensions, add a coincident constraint between the center point of the ellipse and the end point of the sketch. So we're going to create it so that it's long in the X direction and short in the Y direction. So I will make sure that it's got a horizontal constraint here, and then I'll just draw it like that. And I'm going to go ahead and click this here because now I can change these dimensions. So we want 14 millimeters in the Y and 10 millimeters in the X. Whoops. Oops, let me start over there. So 14 millimeters and 10 millimeters in the X. And just to make sure that those are correct, this is 14 millimeters and that matches here. And this is 10 millimeters and that matches here. Okay. Now we're going to add that coincident constraint. Be very careful about where you place this. We want this coincident constraint to connect the center point of the ellipse to this dot that we started on down here at the bottom of the handle. It should look like that when you're all done. Alright. So now we're going to finish the sketch, and we'll use the sweep feature to move that shape up the handle here. So I'm going to finish my sketch. Then I'll go through my sweep tool, which is right here next to revolve. I'm going to select the feature, which I'll just click on sketch 3. And then the sweep path, I'm going to click on each of the lines of the handle like this. And you should see that that feature is solid and add so that it becomes part of our coffee cup shape. Now you might be thinking, hey Mr. Adams, I usually drink coffee out of a cup that doesn't have a solid middle. We'll take care of that next. So we'll go ahead and click the green checkbox. I'm going to hide that plane that I worked on, as well as those sketches. And this is starting to look like a coffee cup. Okay, let's keep going. So now we're going to go through and we're actually going to remove that inner part of the coffee cup. Here's how we're going to do that. First off, we need to make sure that sketch 1 is visible. So make sure you go and poke the eyeball in the feature menu to make sketch 1 visible. Then we're going to use the revolve tool, and we're going to select that inner shape of the coffee mug. Now, be careful where you click. We want this internal shape right here, not the outer wall. This is the outer wall. We want the inside shape, which is what this is right here. We're going to select our revolve axis. Now, at first it's going to complain and be like, what are you doing? We already revolved that. That's because we haven't changed the settings here. So instead of going to add, we're actually going to remove. And the benefit here is, when we created this handle, there was actually a little bit of that handle that poked through the wall of the coffee cup. By doing this step last, we actually cut that part out with the remove, and so we get an inside that is completely perfect with no problems whatsoever. And that is our completed coffee cup. If you follow the instructions, the last step here is to add a fillet on the bottom, which is a 12 millimeter radius. We can do that no problem. Looks like we're adding it to the bottom. So we'll go to fillet tool, 12 millimeters. And that's it. Oh, we need to fillet the top too. Got to smooth out that edge. 2 millimeters on the inside and outside edge. Fillet, inside and outside, 2 millimeters. and then it says that we're going to assign the material, but we're not going to do that for now. So that is how you make the coffee cup. Hopefully this video is helpful. It's a little longer than I wanted it to, but if you need to, you can always speed it up or skip through. If you have any questions or if you need anything, feel free to shoot me a message. Try not to knock over your microphone. Shoot me a message, let me know how I can be helpful, and I'll see you guys next time in class.